With December 21st rapidly approaching, there is a renewed interest in the Mayan calendar. There are a lot of mysteries surrounding the Mayan calendar and the culture that created it. The biggest mystery is what happened to this civilization. It's a civilization as great, if not greater, than the ancient Egyptians, and it collapsed suddenly, and nobody seems to know why. I have a theory of what might have happened to the Mayan culture, and the secret might be hidden in the Mayan calendar itself. When an ancient city is discovered, archaeologists sometimes go to the Bible to see what city it might be. The Bible has been used many times to identify ancient cities, like ancient Jericho, for instance. But there doesn't seem to be any mention of the Mayan civilization anywhere in the Bible. It was a civilization as old, if not older, than the ancient Egyptians, and much larger than Egypt. The Mayans had cities all over Central America, and more are being discovered every year. So why does the Bible ignore half the planet, and only talk about the history of the Eastern Hemisphere? Well, I think the Bible actually does talk about the ancient Mayans, but archaeologists just aren't looking at it the right way. It is my theory that the ancient Mayan culture is the civilization that was destroyed by the Great Flood mentioned in Genesis. I think this for three major reasons. In the Mayan calendar, the months were only 20 days long and a year was only 260 days. Because the Mayan calendar is so different from today's calendar, I think this is evidence of a cataclysmic astronomical event that changed the face of the earth and wiped out the Mayan civilization. The second reason is, Mayan ruins, when first discovered, are buried in many feet of dirt, like they were buried in a flood. And the third reason is, there are great similarities in art and architecture between the Mayans, the Egyptians, and the ancient people who lived in Southeast Asia. Here's what I think happened. Before the flood, the earth was a completely different place. There was a lot less water, and there was more land. The oceans were much smaller, and the land was all connected, so you could walk all around the planet. And there were great civilizations all over the world. The Earth was more perpendicular with the Sun like the other planets, which meant there were no seasons to speak of and no polar ice caps. The months were only 20 days long, and that I think indicated the lunar cycle, so it took 20 days for the moon to revolve around the Earth, unlike now where it takes 28 days. So a year was only 260 days, or 13 lunar cycles. Then, about 4,400 years ago, a giant ice comet came through our solar system like a giant cue ball and struck the Earth. The moon passed through its tail and was hit by a meteor shower, which would explain why the dark side of the moon is covered with craters and why there was once water on the moon. The Earth, however, took the brunt of the impact from this comet, changing it forever. It tilted the Earth on its axis to 23 degrees, which is way more than most of the other planets in our solar system. This created the polar ice caps and would explain all the woolly mammoths frozen in their tracks. This would become known as the Ice Age, and we have been thawing out ever since. The lunar cycle went from 20 days to 28 days, and it also caused a worldwide flood. The significance of December 21st, 2012 comes from the Mayan long count calendar, which consists of 18 20-day months, or 360 days. But there is an older Mayan calendar called the Tzolk'in, which has only 13 20-day lunar cycles, or 260 days. People aren't sure why there are two different versions of the Mayan calendar, but my theory is, before the flood, the length of the year was 260 days. Here's why. What could have happened is when the comet struck the Earth, it hit it at an angle which caused the Earth's rotation to speed up by 40%. Why do I say 40%? Because the math works out. That would make a 20-day lunar cycle go to 28 days, and it would make a 260-day year go to 364 days. Of course, that meant that the days were 40 hours long before the flood. A year still consists of 13 lunar cycles, just like it did before the flood, but there are 40% more days because the Earth is spinning faster. The second part of my theory is all of the archaeological evidence of a ruined great civilization. We all see the pretty pictures of the Mayan temples looking almost as good as they did when they were first built. But the pictures of what they looked like when they were first discovered tell a different story. They were all buried under a lot of dirt. Here are some examples. Here is the temple at Chichen. This temple was built so it lines up with the sun on the spring and autumn equinox, where the days and nights are exactly the same length. They actually have a spring equinox celebration here because in the afternoon, the sun casts a shadow, which looks like a snake going down the steps. If my theory was correct and the earth before the flood was perpendicular with the sun, this would have happened every day. While the temple at Chichen looks great today, here's what it looked like back in 1863. Here's what the Temple of Inscriptions looks like today, and here's what it looked like in 1890. Here is what Monte Alban looks like today, and this is what it looked like back in 1920. Here are before and after pictures of Tikal. And here is Uxmal before and after. In my opinion, the most dramatic example is Teotihuacan. The site is huge. It's 83 square kilometers, and only 5% of it has been excavated. The largest structure on the site is the Pyramid of the Sun. It is the third largest pyramid in the world, and it is built facing where the sun rises during the spring and fall equinox. And they also have a festival there on the spring equinox. Archaeologists think that the equinoxes played a big part of the Mayan culture, because much of their architecture is based on these 2 days. Again, if my theory were correct, the sun would have risen every morning facing the Pyramid of the Sun. This is what the Sun Pyramid looks like today, and this is what it looked like in 1905. Also at Teotihuacan is the Avenue of the Dead and the Pyramid of the Moon. This is what it looked like in the 1800s. In order for my theory to be true, the dates these temples were supposedly built would be off by a few thousand years. Current thought, for instance, the Sun Pyramid was supposed to be built around 100 AD. The problem with that is that there are a lot of structures in the Eastern Hemisphere which are as old and older that aren't buried under many feet of sediment. I think that these structures were built around the time the Mayan calendar was started, 5,126 years ago, up until the flood, which is about 4,400 years ago. 2012 is the year 5,772 on the Jewish calendar and 4,709 on the Chinese calendar. This timeline corresponds with the Bible quite well. So the Mayans is the civilization that existed between the creation and the flood. The other part of my theory is that the Mayan culture existed in other places around the globe, and you can see this in the art and architecture in Egypt and in Asia and even Europe. Here are some images I found on Richard Casero's website, where he compares Mayan art and architecture to the Egyptians and to the Balinese cultures. And here is a pyramid that was recently discovered in Bosnia, which is bigger than the Great Pyramid in Egypt. And it is a stepped pyramid, or ziggurat, like the Mayan pyramids. This site actually consists of 3 pyramids, and they're still all buried under many feet of topsoil. Of course, for my theory to be true, the flood and the story of Noah's Ark from the Bible would have actually had to have happened. Well, I think it did, because I think they found the Ark in the mountains of Ararat in Turkey. Today, it is an ark-shaped pile of rotting wood. They found ancient rivets all over the area in a boat-shaped pattern. Plus, there are sea anchors in this site. And there is a visitor center. I know this theory brings up a lot of other questions, and I will get into those later, but I thought it was important to get this movie out before December 21st, while there is a heightened interest in the Mayan calendar. I hope to make more videos soon talking about my theory. Oh, and by the way, I don't think anything is going to happen on December 21st. It's basically just an odometer turning over back to zero.